So it's 2024, and maybe you decided for your New Year's resolution that you wanted to start playing tabletop role playing games, or maybe you're already playing tabletop role playing games and you want to start a new one. There are a ton of systems out there, and maybe the system for you decided was Pathfinder. Well, maybe I can help you with that. It is a system that I decided that I like the most, and it's the one that I like to play. So let's, from a very, very basic level and from a player's perspective, let's go ahead and talk about how you can get into playing Pathfinder and a little bit of the basics and maybe what you can do in order to try to get started. So, with all this being said, my name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. So, because you're still watching this video, I'm going to assume that you decided that Pathfinder 2nd Edition was the system that you chose in order to play your next tabletop role-playing game adventure with. Well, what is Pathfinder? So, a good way to think about most of these systems is that Pathfinder is a set of rules, it's a set of bounds, it's a set of ways for you to interact with a virtual world. It doesn't necessarily have an adventure itself within it. It is a set of rules in order to create adventures. It does have lore, it does have countries, it does have what's called the world of Galarian that has many different biomes and political systems, as well as people who inhabit those countries, whether they're normal creatures, they could be undead, or they could be pretty much anything that is available. But Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Remaster, is really just a set of rules and bounds in order to bring these adventures to life. If you want to play something specific, there is probably an adventure that is already published for that, or you can go ahead and create your own in order to work underneath the Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules system. So by getting into Pathfinder, you aren't getting the adventure itself, you're getting a way to run those adventures. Now, Paizo, the company that publishes Pathfinder, has a bunch of adventures, adventure paths, which are larger adventures, usually covering a few different books or chapters, as well as Pathfinder Society, which has much smaller adventures. And then there are multiple third-party publishers that have adventures out there that I'm really, really happy to support, because a lot of times these third-party adventures are very unique. But there are plenty of adventures to play, in addition to some free ones that are available through Paizo itself that you can go ahead and play and see if you like the system. Now, I did bring something up just a few sentences ago, and that is Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Remaster. And I do want to kind of tell you what those are so you know what you're getting into and you know what books you might be looking at. Now, Pathfinder 2nd Edition has been around for, about 3 years or so, a little bit more than that. And Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a set of rules different from Pathfinder 1st Edition. They introduced a bunch of new things, but Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the system that is currently running. Now, there is a new core rulebook that came out November 15th called the Remaster Project. And the Remaster Project, what it did is, due to some issues that occurred outside of Pathfinder, they basically came up with a new version that separated Pathfinder from some of its history, and some of its history includes Dungeons and Dragons. And it basically changed the naming, changed how some rules work in a, I will say, minor way, but that is up to debate, and also included some changes to some of the classes and some of the more minor things that they felt would help facilitate really good and easy gameplay into the Remaster books. Now, if you happen to get a hold of a Pathfinder 2nd Edition handbook or a rule book, 99% of the rules are going to be exactly the same. There are some changes in the Remaster, and the Remaster books are out, and those you can get. Now, just to kind of physically show you the difference, this is the original 2E rulebook, and you'll see kind of over in this hand here, we have the new player core for the Remaster. Once again, they are separate books. The player core is the book that is going to be going forward, and there are some changes to the rules. I personally feel they're minor, and it's largely thought that the changes are minor. However, just be aware that there are two different versions of the rulebook out there at the moment, and the new version is the player core. Now, one thing I will say is that a lot of the adventures that are already pre-published from Paizo itself, generally speaking, were written with 2e rules. So if you have the original 2e handbook, that's fine to play. And then you can bring up the remaster. And there are some resources I'll give you that you can go ahead and look at what the changes would be to the remaster down in the description below. So what do you need to play Pathfinder? Well, we'll start off with the people resources that you're going to need. So you need a game master or a GM, and usually 3 to 5 other players, but it could be more or it could be less. It depends on how you and your group want to play. It kind of depends on the table. Now, the GM or the game master, they are the one that describe an adventure. The world, the environment, the interactions, and the encounters that the players have, and is generally kind of the arbiter or the one who determines how the rules apply in each of the individual situations that the players find themselves in. They will set the scene, they'll set the obstacles, and the options that the players will have to navigate. Now, at least in my mind, the Game Master is also playing the game. They get to bring the NPCs or non-player characters that are in the adventure to life, and they control the creatures that the players will encounter and get into combat with. The Game Master will also determine the outcomes on the infinite number of actions that a player can take in a game and rule if a chosen action that a player thinks they want to do is even possible in that particular situation. Now, this might make you think that the Game Master is playing against the players, but that's not really the case and not how it should be. They are there to present the adventure to the players and to try to give a good experience. They are playing the game right alongside the players, but they are facilitating the story and the world rather than just playing one character. Now, defeating the characters can be part of that story for sure, but so is the player's success against the obstacles of the adventures. A hero's journey isn't very heroic without risk. Now, the players also take a role in telling the story as well, but it's how they play their characters, how they act their characters out, and how they role play them as the individual player would feel comfortable. The sessions should feel like a fully interactive story that you are making as the adventure continues. Now, the level of role play is as individual to the table as there are players. So you would do what feels fun for your table at a level that you're comfortable doing it. So don't feel the need to be one of these actors who fully embodies the character, who has the outfit on. A lot of times, real plays videos that you might see kind of give you the impression on a level of role play you have to get into, but every table is different, and don't do something you're not comfortable with. Now, the players in general will control only their player and make decisions on what their character will do. They might have familiars, they might have pets, they might have animal companions based on the class or archetype they play, but in general, they will control their player. Now, you as a player need to determine, do you want to play yourself or do you want to play something totally different than you? It's really up to you. The players will work with their party to overcome, interact, and enjoy the options and encounters that the GM and the adventure has put in front of them. Now, when the players interact with the world, they use their characters' attributes, their skills, their spells, familiars, anything the player has at their disposal, and the GM will sometimes have the players roll dice to determine how they have used their abilities against whatever they come across. Now, after you make your character, you'll see that the character is usually very good at some things and just average at others. And you might just be downright bad at a few things here and there. So let's see where these modifiers come from by taking a look at a basic character sheet as a player, and we'll just do a first level starting character. Now, your character's abilities and statistics are recorded on a character sheet that you create, or you can use a pre-made one. All these abilities and statistics are a result of the choices that were made during the character creation process. Now, at the top of your sheet is your character basics. In general, these will not change throughout the character's adventuring career. Things like their name, their ancestry, their background, and their class will remain the same, but as they get experience and they get further along in their adventures, they will gain levels which will increase other abilities and skills as they go along. Now, next up on the character sheet is the character's attributes. Now, you can select these during character creation from a pool available to characters through the character creation process. Your choices on ancestry, background, and class will give you bonuses, but can also give you negatives depending on what you select. The attributes are fairly self explanatory, but I will say they are broken into two general groups. You have your strength, dexterity, and constitution are physical attributes, and intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are the mental attributes. Each attribute modifier starts at 0, and that represents the human average, so don't think of 0 as a negative. That particular attribute might just be normal, but we're making adventurers, so although they can't be excellent at everything, they are good at what you choose to specialize in, and as you make your character choices, you'll adjust these modifiers by applying attribute boosts, which increase an attribute modifier, and attribute flaws, which decrease an attribute modifier. Each ancestry will provide attribute boosts and sometimes an attribute flaw. Now, the background you select will also provide 2 attribute boosts, and your class selection will boost that class's key attribute. Now, in this particular case, we have a cleric, so the wisdom is going to be boosted because you chose a cleric, and that is a cleric's class key attribute. Now, the last attribute boosts you get are 4 free boosts that you get to apply however you wish. Now, as you apply these boosts, you basically get a bonus or a plus number to that particular attribute, which will help in rolls as you get on with your adventuring career. Now, the next line we're going to go to is the armor class, saving throws, and hit points. Your armor class or AC is determined by your dexterity, your proficiency, and whenever I say proficiency, really in the rest of the video, it's basically can be thought of as training, usually given by the class you chose, in a certain type of armor and the piece of armor itself. Now, moving on to your saving throws, you have fortitude, which is tied to your constitution, and proficiency, once again, training, and could include items. Reflex, which is tied to your dexterity and proficiency, and could also include items. And lastly, you have your will save, which is tied to your wisdom and whatever proficiency or training you have, and again, can include items. Now, last on this particular line are your hit points, which are a general measure of health and damage that a character can sustain. Your hit points are usually determined by your constitution and what you get from your ancestry and class. Now, one of the last things that you're actively going to select for your character itself is the skills that they have. There are 16 basic skills and any number of lower skills you can choose from or get from your background or class selection. And depending on what you choose with your ancestry, you might get something from your ancestry. The number you can select are based on your class and your intelligence. Now we'll cover a few other things, like there are some odds and ends on the front of the character sheet, such as languages, which are based on your ancestry and intelligence, your perception, which is based on your wisdom and proficiency, your speed, which is based on your ancestry, at least to start, and your class DC, which is based on a base number of 10, plus your key attribute bonus, plus whatever proficiency or training you might have. Now that you have the basics, you can adjust some things. An example would be armor class. In order to adjust your armor class, you just buy the things that you want to wear, and certain armors will give you a certain bonus to your armor class. Or maybe you want to adjust how hard you can hit. So you can buy a certain weapon that is available to your class in order to give you a higher roll. Now that you kind of understand what a player is and how what a player chooses might affect the game, let's go ahead and talk about what you need to get started. Well, with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, there are so many ways that you can get started. The first way you might think of is by purchasing the Player Core Handbook and the GM Core Handbook if you want to be a Game Master for the Remaster, and that's certainly a great way to get started, but there are other options out there. Another way that I can recommend is a totally free option, and that would be the Archives of Nethys. Now, at the moment, they're in the process of incorporating the remaster into this, but that should be finished relatively soon. If you do go to the Archives of Nethys has a player's guide, and I'll include a link to that below in the description. You can read all the rules and learn how to play without any expense whatsoever. Now, as another free option, I would also recommend checking out your local library, as they really are an underutilized resource that you might be able to borrow the books for free. I know I was pretty surprised by a small library out near where I live that actually had the 2E handbook sitting right there for anybody to borrow without any cost whatsoever. Now, there are other non-free options out there where you can buy the books like Demiplane and Roll20, and I'm sure that there are a ton of others out there that do present the material in fantastic ways. However, there is a cost associated to them. Usually it's less than the cost of a print book. However, there is a cost associated with them. Now, one other option that you should keep an eye out for is the Humble Bundle website. At this very moment, January 1st of 2024, there is a bundle that is up for a few more days that includes the pre-remaster 2e Player Handbook, Advanced Player's Guide, Game Mastery Guide, the bestiaries, and a bunch of lore and adventures available for a very low price. Now, as mentioned before, the Legacy 2e books are mostly the same as the remaster versions, but it will not include the new changes. However, it's still a good deal for the adventures and the lore books alone. Now, all those options are presented, but really what I would really recommend, and also if you just want to try the system out to determine if it's even right for you, like we said at the beginning, there are a ton of different TTRPG systems out there, and Pathfinder might not be the one. Well, I'm going to recommend the Pathfinder Beginner's Box, and I kind of have it right here. The Beginner's Box is a short adventure for 2 to 5 players that gradually introduces both the players and new game masters into the system and rules. It includes an adventure, and that adventure can take as little as an hour or two, or can take longer, and it really depends on how the table plays it, how deep they want to get into every nook and cranny of the adventure. And it includes a limited but great rulebook and GM guide, so both the players and the GM can learn as they go about the adventure. It also includes some pre-made characters ready to go, so you don't have to do character creation, a set of dice, as well as some really good reference cards for commonly used rules that I still use to this day, and a great adventure, really just to see if you like the system. Now, what if you can't play in person? Well, fortunately for Pathfinder, there are a ton of virtual tabletops out there that allow you to play virtually. And for all of the major virtual tabletops, there are beginner box modules that are available in order to play the game virtually, so you don't have to do it in person. Now, there are also a ton of other resources that you can go to if you want to play, but you don't have a group. The first thing I'd recommend if you want to play in person is to go to your local game store and ask if there are groups with open seats. A lot of times they will have beginner games set up to introduce players to the game because you know your local game store would like to sell more products, and the way they sell more products is to get people to play games. So your local game store is a really good place to ask and see if there are any groups with open seats. Now, you can also look on warhorn.net and the Pathfinder 2e Looking for Group Discord channel in order to see if there are any virtual games out there that you'd like to play. And if you would like to try maybe a paid gaming option just to see if you like the system, a good website is Start Playing for paid games, but there are options out there to play if you would like to play, whether you have a group or not. Now, starting to play can seem intimidating, but one of the best ways to get into the hobby is to just jump in. Most game masters and players that I know like new players and love teaching them the basics of the game. I mean, this is their hobby and it's what they like to do, and people will spend a lot of time playing these games. And who doesn't like sharing their hobbies with others who are just learning? You just need to let them know beforehand, and they will let you know if the adventure that they're currently doing and playing is good for a beginner. There are some games that people might be playing where maybe the players are at level 18 and high level play really might not be understandable to a beginner and could possibly set you back because it would be so confusing with all the high level play that is going on. It probably wouldn't do much to teach a newcomer to the game, but it never hurts to ask. Now, I do hope you did enjoy this really basic introduction to what Pathfinder is and how you could get started playing. If you want to get into tabletop role-playing games and you decided that Pathfinder is the game that you want to play, there are so many good ways to get into it. And it is not a hard system to play once you actually look at it. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.